back to the podcast.
She's like, get out of my face with that business. She's like, look how beautiful I am. Just look at it.
It's back now.
Oh, we're recording?
Yes.
Okay. Look at her. Look at her. The co-host is Hopi Tayo. That's good. That's good content. Stolen or heard. I want to pick up with the idea we left with, which is our capacities for different and intuitions for different scenarios are, I think, interesting. Is she breathing into your mic?
Is our capacities for picking dogs also?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's see. Is she doing okay or okay?
You just breathing. Yeah, well, the reason I brought it up in that way was I feel like we've been in some scenarios in which I wouldn't even give that scenario like another glance, and I made up my mind real quick about a scenario.
Or a person?
Usually a person.
It's only ever applied to a person.
Real quick. And it's funny because I feel you give people such grace in so many situations that I just do not give. The leg up is egregious.
She's stealing the show.
Yeah, and you do that, and I really admire that about you. But I think what's really funny is we usually end up landing in the same spot eventually. But it's just
true.
The way we process or come to that is just very, very different.
Why do you think you're maybe a little quicker to go there and I'm a little slower to go there? When you say like hard cutoff of or hard decision about somebody.
I think a lot of my like split decision making is very much like a defense mechanism for me, and I'll be interested in your perspective of my reactions. But yeah, I think some of it's a defense mechanism of like, I want to hold this boundary and I want to protect myself. And I've been in a scenario that's maybe similar, or maybe this is reminding me of a scenario I've been in. And instead of just continually engaging, which might cause stress or distress, I'm like, I just won't engage at all. And I'm just like, and that's that.
That makes a ton of sense from what I know of you too, especially because the only times I've seen you feel like that have been because somebody hurt your feelings that you already care about.
Yeah.
And so it's so funny because I didn't realize that. Remember how we were talking about earlier today of like, it's almost like that bartering system of if you extend yourself to me, that is you showing you care for me.
Yes.
And I definitely see that come up for you in those moments.
Like if you're willing to deal with my, like, and it's funny because I've never had to do this with Tom, but I'm like, if you can get through me like being mean to you and like pushing you off and like giving you the stiff arm,
pouty,
yeah, then like I'll let you in.
Power,
because it shows the work. Yeah, it's like you're doing the work. You don't care that like I might have, this false tough exterior,
or that they're just willing to fight through that.
Yeah.
Especially because you can be a feisty little one.
A feisty, yeah. And I've done that in a lot of dating scenarios, right? Because it's like, I'm so used to people, and I think a lot of people have been in this scenario, is like unexpected loss in relationships and ghosting and all of these things. And so you kind of build this protective bubble around yourself in which where it's like, you know what, I'm just like going to be a jerk, and I'm just going to like be like, whatever, man, you're not going to stick around anyway. And then if you prove me wrong, then I'm like, oh, well then maybe this will work. But I've extended this to all these other scenarios
where you've shut down what you feel like is too early.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's a lot of what I walk into. We walk into a lot of scenarios together as friends.
Right.
Because we share and occupy a lot of the same spaces.
Especially new stuff. Like we go into a lot of new scenarios, environments, groups of people.
Yeah. And we, again, have very similar yet very different perspectives or takes on this scenario, which I think is just like endlessly interesting.
It is.
But we always arrive at the same conclusions. It's just it just takes us different periods of time to arrive to the same conclusion. And I think that I just realized my phone. I think that speaks to safety in a relationship, because we're able to not agree necessarily, maybe not disagree, but we're not necessarily in the same space.
Seeing it the same exact way.
But we are able to arrive there when it's right for us.
And even accept that it might be different. It might just be different.
Yeah.
We might just feel differently about that person and have different relationships and experiences. And
Yeah.
but that is something you've helped me to look at in myself, is just because I can be very forgiving doesn't mean I need to be.
Yeah. And I love that about you. That's one of my favorite things about you. I'm like, Nikita has every reason to just not forgive or be in scenarios in which she's giving grace and patience and space and all these things. But you do it anyway.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this a number of times of what that offers. It feels almost like selfish when I do it, because I feel like I'm just making room for my errors in other people. Because the moment I'm judging you and like, how dare you, and what does that say about you as a person to your core? It's like, well, when I make a mistake, then I start to question that about myself too, instead of just being very curious about, well, why'd you do that? And why in that scenario? And if you didn't like that and it doesn't match you, how do you make sure you don't do that again?
Right. Yeah, I think you give this grace and space for people that is so beautiful, but it's just, in my opinion, could be more carefully selected.
100%.
But I hear what you're saying. You're saying, like, if I do this for you, or I don't do this for you, like you're not going to do it for me. And so I want to show up for myself in a way that I'm showing up for you.
Even as you say that, you're making me realize that part of why now it's so important for me to do is because, and one of my favorite things to work with is complex trauma.
Yeah.
And how that impacts people and how they show up. And I know for a fact that there were times in my life that I responded from my own trauma with such an ignorance and lack of awareness for the destruction I was causing myself and others.
Yeah.
And it made me do things that absolutely do not match me, that I would not. I've told you this before, like, I've ran into people from years ago and they will not even recognize me because of how differently I hold myself.
Yeah.
Compared to when I was responding and acting out of my trauma.
Yeah.
And so I think I see other people do that and I see them be the worst of themselves. And I go, oh, you don't even realize yet what you're doing. And I wish you would, and that you realize that you could completely flip the script on this if you decided to.
And I wish maybe that at that time somebody was holding that space for me.
Oh, I'll cry. Shut up.
That's what you do. But that's what you do for people. You show up for people in a way that you wanted to be showed up for, and you show up for people like, again, like everything that you exude is like this kind of almost like non-judgmental awareness, which is like my favorite phrase that I feel like I've stolen from you.
I didn't even know I had that phrase.
You've said it. You've definitely said it. It's like providing, I use it a lot in the context of like working with families, is like we have this behavioral challenge, and acknowledging it in a non-judgmental way is really beneficial. Mm-hmm. That can, it might lead to stress, like we keep talking about, but it's stress, not distress, when we acknowledge it. And so I think I like that you do that, but there are times where it just really makes me mad that you do it, because I'm just like, they don't deserve it. They're not holding the space for you. And like, it just, I don't know. I think you just operate on such a higher level. Like the fact that you're even having like this complex thought of like, well, I want to hold space for you because this is how I would want to be treated, and all of that. It's like, man, all the thought that you're bringing to that is like, they're not even bringing 1% to that.
You're such my favorite.
It just,
but this is your strength. This is what you do, because you make me feel it in abundance. And I think it's the same reason it's part of your healing, is you see people's goodness and you see their love and their capabilities, and then you get defensive for them.
Yeah, I love getting defensive for people.
You'll get more angry for somebody else that somebody did something than they will. Like, you're the person that's like, oh, you don't like your sandwich? That's not what you ordered? I'll go up and get you the exact sandwich that you ordered.
I'm the type of therapist that will like be outraged for you, and like if you want me to, like, I will make a stink.
Let me face somebody else.
I will literally be like, I will take time out of my day. This is non-billable, and I will attend that IEP meeting, and I will tell them everything that they're doing wrong.
I will hate them for free.
Literally for free. I am that person that is like, I have, you know, that meme in The Office where what's his face is like writing down his list of like his shit list. Like, that is me to a T.
Especially with clients. Right? I get that so real.
Oh my God. And it's like, oh, like you, like I have my shit list, and I'm like looking at it and I'm just like, oh, like they wronged you when you were in 7th grade and they made fun of your haircut.
Do you get on the list? I'm curious about that for you now, if we like change into, but see, it's rare for me to run into families necessarily like hold together. So like usually I'll run into a client and I work with them and they might be out with their families or a whole bunch of other people, and I know every single one of them.
You're like, I know that Sandra on Christmas of 2018 said X, Y, and Z, and yeah.
I've had some funny sessions where I'm like, was the one that was wearing the cream cardigan? That was your sister, wasn't it? And she's like, yup. Knew it.
That's why I've been loving all these memes and videos of like therapists being like, as the like millennial or Gen Z therapist, like we want to see pictures of the people you're talking about, and like, yeah, please do. That's so fun. And again, it's like this idea of like safety and relationship, and like it's reciprocal, right? So like, I want to see who you are, and I want to see who your friends are, if you feel comfortable enough with sharing that, because I think that like brings more space and more safety and I think enjoyment.
It's a
for
bond.
Everybody.
It's a bond when you can go there.
Yeah.
Because we were saying that, like how serious therapy can be and how hard the work can be, but those moments where you're just joined with.
Yeah, and then you're like, he made you cry?
Girl, what are you even?
Baby, what is you doing?
When?
Yeah, I don't know how we got to that.
We were talking about how good you are at loving people
being mad
and
for
protecting them. And that is definitely one thing you will do, is you will remind people of their worth by reminding them that they should be mad about something or should not allow somebody to treat them a certain way.
Yeah, and it reminds me of this one clip that I saw. I think it was like Amber Rose was talking about like forgiveness and like grudge holding, and was like, somebody was like, well, you know, shouldn't you like forgive and shouldn't you move on? And she was like, no, fuck that. She was like, no, I don't want to forgive them. What does that do? I'm allowed to be angry.
Yeah.
And being angry is fine sometimes. Yep. And so and Tom and I have had a lot of these conversations, because he is not, when Tom holds a grudge, or like Tom has like a heavy feeling about something, I know that it's like a big deal.
I was just gonna say, I would assume Tom is like very like you'd have to
literally have tried to kill him to hold a grudge.
You'd have to be a real piece of shit.
Yeah, and so we've had a lot of conversations about that, and I think that again, it's like he reminds me of you in that way, of like the grace that he gives to people when they don't deserve it, and or at least in my opinion don't deserve it. And then I am in this scenario and we're having these conversations, and I'm just like, I think that grudges can be good sometimes. Yeah. I think it's important to remember like who a type of person is, right? Because it's really easy.
They show you.
it's really easy to romanticize things. It's easy to kind of like surface level, or I've noticed this, and I've noticed this in a friend recently. I like to call it almost like it's like a cognitive restructuring, where it's like I'm coming up with this explanation of their behavior to explain it away because it makes it more comfortable of an idea for me to grapple with.
Yeah, then you don't have to be upset with them.
Then I don't have to be upset. So if I can say that the reason that they did this thing is because they are X, Y, Z type of person, that is way easier for me to, because it's concrete, it's declarative, right? Like, this is who you are.
Yeah,
So
and it makes sense.
There's no gray area, right? And it's hard. I can't really give the example. I can't give it I was having a conversation with a friend about a person who did a really terrible thing. And I watched them say, well, I talked to so-and-so and it's because they're this type of person. They told me it's they do this because of this. And I found that really interesting because I was like, that I can see it happening in front of my eyes, where it's like, that was easier for you to process than all of the gray area and alternate explanations and things that could also go into conceptualizing why, you know? So I think it's important to remember those things. And I'm that friend. I will be that friend for you. So when you're sitting there and you feel like you want to romanticize or recall something, and then we talk about it, and I'm like, but actually, do you remember that it really was actually like this?
Right.
And it wasn't like that. And it wasn't like that at all. Mm. You know? Which again, double-edged sword. I think it's a good thing. It could be a good thing and it could be a bad thing.
Our greatest strengths are always our greatest weaknesses.
Yeah, and so I think getting older and always being in this like learning process is I feel like I'm always trying to find the middle ground.
Right? A
like,
balance of all.
Where's the balance? Yeah, I think it's a lot of it is about balance and how can I bring this to the scenario, but how can I also maybe be a little bit more forgiving or a little bit more gracious?
I'm curious for you, Tom, if one, you agree with that you are a very forgiving person, and then why you think you are like that.
I think just because of what I've been through, I don't have the capacity to care about things that don't affect me greatly. It does have to be something very extreme. Not extreme, but it must be a neighbor, but it has to be something pretty egregious for me to hold a legitimate grudge. Yeah.
But I like what I hear when he says that is like, you said it has to be pretty legitimate. It has to be pretty egregious, right? But you had a response to it, and it was at the time a
like
big deal. Like you had a feeling, right? Like you experienced this thing, and why now is it not a big deal?
What?
What makes it legitimate?
What makes what?
When you said it would have to be like a pretty big deal, like a pretty legitimate reason, what makes it? Because Kelsey's almost saying the fact that you're bothered by it in itself is a valid reason to be upset or to maybe even hold a boundary. I don't want to say you cut somebody off fully, but you're saying it has to be something that feels legitimate to do that.
I suppose it's legitimate, egregious, i.e. meaning like something causing myself or somebody I care about harm or not just discomfort, but like to wrong somebody close to me. I take that very personally, or to take advantage of, or to be hypocritical. I find that very like I find those things a lot less excusable than other things.
Curious about the hypocritical one. The other
sorry to break it. That is such a thing for him. That really gets hypocrisy. Really gets him.
That
going.
stood out to me because the other part is so you. It's like, oh yeah, if I see somebody do wrong on to somebody else, like and I'm like, oh, that totally matches you. But the hypocrisy part, why is that?
I don't know. I just think it's wrong to tell people to do things, or tell people not to do things, and then a person themselves does it in turn. I think that's just it's backwards. That's all. So it's incorrect. It's not right. It should be fixed.
I could go into a whole therapy session.
I
about
know.
why.
I love picking apart your brain. Because for me, I think it has to be egregious for Tom to hold a grudge. But there have been so many things in his life that he has experienced that I think are worth,
That you find egregious?
that I find egregious, that I
Right.
think are worth holding a grudge. And I think when I hear you say, like, it doesn't, I almost feel like I hear you saying, like, it doesn't serve me
Yes.
to continue to hold the grudge, which again, I think is just like a lovely, it's such a lovely thing, right? To sit and be like, this does not serve me to continue to hold this space
It's
for
a-
this emotion or situation.
It's a cliche for a reason. A grudge is drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die.
See, I don't agree with that.
You're
So interesting.
you're holding poison. You're holding venom within yourself, and that is making you upset. Or it could make you. You could even be laying in bed one night and then think about it,
Yeah.
or something, and it would keep you up. Meanwhile, the other person has no thought of it at all. Like, it does nothing. It could not even. They couldn't even fathom the grudge that you're holding, because that's just how that a lot of that stuff works.
It's so
in my opinion.
Well, it's so true. And I never thought about it this way, but it's like you're saying, Tom, it's like a poison. Like, it works against you. It doesn't benefit you to hold it. And Kels, from your perspective, it benefits you. At least sometimes. I hear you acknowledge, like, sometimes it's not. But you're like, it benefits me to hold it. It empowers me. It makes me hold a boundary. It reminds me and others even of their self-worth. Like, it doesn't burn you to hold your anger. Not all the time.
I found a way to make it productive.
I think she's found a great way to reframe it.
Right? It just feels differently.
Cognitive restructuring.
Exactly.
It is. It's a reframe, but I think when we've had this conversation, you brought up that point, and I don't completely disagree with it, because I think that has been something that I don't like within myself. Is I don't want to be this person that, like, holds all this space and power for people that don't deserve it. Like, that's something I've grappled with, where it's like, I have this grudge. You know, am I holding this venom, and am I poisoning myself in holding this space? But again, it's like, to me, I feel like I'm using it in a way of, like, this is a reminder of, like, what I value and what I want, and I don't want to be in this situation again, or I don't want you to be in that situation again.
There is not much, though. There are not many things that I find that I observe that are stronger than spite. And out of sheer spite, I will not let something occupy my brain out of, like, maybe, like, I hold it as, like, a sign of strength to not let something or an action bother me down the line. I find it stronger to let it go and be past it.
Yeah.
Like, what's stronger than hate? Indifference. That's kind of how I arrived at it. I probably talked about it, or I probably spun it in a confusing way, but
Do you think that that's because you come to a place where you're like, I'm almost wondering if that indifference makes it so you aren't hurt anymore, like you reclaim
Sure.
it, because that's what always stands out to me, Kels, when you're in that place. It's because you're really hurt by that person still. Like, your feelings are, like, I can't believe they did that, or they just don't care, or they're just still not, they even know I'm upset, but they're still not doing something.
Yeah.
So it's like, you don't want to let it, because you're like, I'm hurt about it. But then when I heard you say that, Tom, you were like, I take it back from them when
I take it back.
But that
You can't have it. It's mine.
yeah.
that's a theme.
You can't
though,
hurt me. Can't hurt me anymore.
It's a theme that I noticed with Tom, though, because I feel like he's good at dismissing his own feelings and pushing them down and making them smaller. And this is a read, sorry, but I do think that is very indicative of that response of, like,
I'm done with it now.
I'm done with
Sealed
it
up.
now. My feelings aren't that important anyway, and so I'm just gonna, like, let it go.
She says I intellectualize my feelings away. Sometimes.
So I have this experience, and I always kind of struggle with this, where I feel like I oscillate between the two, and I've just settled on that's part of processing, where I will at times be able to let things go and I won't be angry about it anymore. It'll be done. And then it'll come
But-
up. And I'll be like, I'll think about it in a new way, and I'll get like a new flavor about it. And I just kind of sit on it for a minute, and I'll be like, I swear that thing was done.
Yeah, well, that's where it's almost interesting too, to bring us back to the idea of like stress versus distress. Is things can feel comfortable and things can feel like they're dealt with or processed, and then they come up in funny, interesting ways. And I feel like this is where I love like the gravitational pull of our friendship in like understanding my body's response to this thing, because it's often like our bodies, I think I've noticed lately, my body is almost responding to the event before I'm cognitively aware of
Always.
it. And then I'm just like, man, why do I feel all funny? And why does my stomach hurt? And I'm really tired right now. And I'm very anxious.
If you could teach, if it could be taught, like the instinct to follow one's gut would just be so powerful, because
Somatic IFS.
the gut instinct is so insanely strong and usually scarily correct.
Tell us what somatic IFS is.
I'm sure that there's 1,000 different theories and approaches that talk about these tools from different lenses, but IFS is what I really use. IFS stands for Internal Family Systems, which is a much more complicated name to just talk about the different parts of us at play. I think this is coming up a lot in social media, where it's talking about like the different narrators that you hear that pop up for you.
Okay.
And especially in a moment like if you're in a situation with friends and you love these people, and so you usually are expecting to have a great time. That's what you're expecting of it. And you go into it and you're like, I'm having a great time, right? But your intuition is like, something feels off. I don't feel connected to them the way I usually do. I'm not enjoying it the way I usually do. I actually feel like drained about it. It's really easy to ignore that and go, but that probably means nothing. Like they're friends of mine, everything's, and maybe you're right. Maybe it is a one-off or it's nothing. But then when you were saying that, like, how do I tap into that intuition a little bit more? I like to do exactly that. Like, what?
Explore it. Like, don't dismiss it.
It means something.
Engage with it.
I might not need to do anything with it. It might just be like a one-off for that night, but it definitely means something. And then a lot of IFS and somatic work. IFS is about creating an organizational system for all the different thought processes that you have. That's all it is. It's just creating words that allow you to organize it better so you can think through it and understand it more. And then somatic is your body connection. So like a certain part will come up and it will feel a certain way in one particular part of your body. And if you pay enough attention to that, you'll start to notice like, oh, around this person, I always get this sinking feeling in my stomach, in the center of my stomach.
If it, an even more simplistic way I think to describe this is talking about like just reflecting on your bodily processes in response to very obvious things, hot and cold.
Good.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like when I rub my hands together, what do I feel? I feel warmth. When I need to use the bathroom, my bladder feels full. Yeah. Right? So it's like that's a very basic kind of foundational, like when you can start putting together like context and bodily response and emotion and bodily response, you can then like build up this it is almost like teaching intuition in a way, because you're analyzing and organizing your cognitive and somatic responses to events.
Exactly.
And the phrasing, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because what I was going to say was teaching interoception, which is what like an occupational therapist might call like teaching like bodily awareness. And that brings us almost to like this mindfulness, right? Like it's all comes into play when it comes to intuition.
Yeah.
And responses. And how do I develop and grow my intuition if I'm not even aware of how my body is responding to stress? So like, where do you start?
So there's actually, when I start that, there's a few different things, but you're also reminding me, it's called biosocial feedback, or you maybe could Google that for me, make sure I think it's something along the lines of like biosocial feedback. But it's really interesting. I don't remember how all they set up the tools. I know it's like partly your heart rate and movement like on your seat, but it will bring awareness to the physical cues that are happening in your body. And I like to do that a lot around emotional flooding. So I will usually warn those that I'm working with, just because it can feel a little intrusive to have somebody commenting on your body all the time. But I might say, like, I just noticed the tension in your jaw.
Yes. Okay. I be doing this and I don't even realize
Exactly. Yeah.
Could it be bi-psychosocial?
Yes. Thank you. By psychosocial. And there's different kinds of, I even forget where that originated from. I know Gottman used a lot of that research just to talk about approaches that helped couples in sessions to emotionally regulate, but it's bringing that attunement.
George Engel and John Romano, University of Rochester, 1977.
There we go.
Yeah. So, but I think that that's almost the foundation of we're talking a lot about like intuition and stress and somatic responses and things like that, and I feel like the foundation of emotional regulation and learning intuition and learning yourself is creating like body awareness. And that's something that's a focus of mine that I've started to include as of late in my work with the kids and the families that I've been working with, because I'm typically working with, autistic kids up to 21 with, a lot of behavioral acuities. So we had talked about what acuities means. Basically, like, safety is an utmost concern in the moment, right? So I can't leave you unsupervised, or you're going to engage in these things that maybe might hurt yourself and others, right? So I'm working with a lot of dysregulated children, and they don't even know why they're upset.
Yes.
They don't even know why their body's responding, and they don't even... I feel like for half the kids that I work with, like, I could put a mirror in front of them and they wouldn't even realize how they're acting, right? Because when you're in this space of fight, flight, and freeze, and it's survival fight mode, all of this crazy stuff happens.
100%.
Aggression. You say things that you don't mean. You do things that you regret. You break things, whatever that looks like. And so for me as a BCBA, I'm like, okay, this kid is experiencing dysregulation. I want to teach them a coping strategy, just like you might do with an individual, in therapy that has complex trauma. How do I teach you a coping strategy if you don't even have a foundational understanding of how your body responds to stress? How can I help walk you towards a coping strategy if you can't even identify, like, my muscles feel tense when XYZ happens?
So I don't know how you do it, but that's where I always like to even offer some optimism for people when they're starting these tasks. Of sometimes in the therapy sessions is where your practice will begin. And you might not be able to do these things on your own in a way where you feel like, oh, I'm putting 2 and 2 together. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And so that for me might be, if I have somebody in there telling me like, oh, I'm really not aware of these things, or I'm not noticing them when they come up, I might go through like timeline of significant events where we talk about things that elicit some emotion or some specific emotion in you historically. And then as I notice cues within you.
I see. So you bring up a timeline event, and then as you're having that conversation, you might say, hey, I'm noticing that your jaw is tense or whatever. Is that kind of what you're pointing me to?
That, and I'll even start a little more vaguely first. If I will ask, where do you feel that in your body?
Oh, okay.
To see what they notice. Because sometimes it's also not a feeling. Sometimes it's, I feel nothing.
Yeah, which is also, what is that indicative of, right? Like, talk about intuition and exploring something. Like, why do I feel nothing in this scenario?
And then sometimes then it's about, let's connect with your body while we're connecting with these emotions.
Yeah.
And that can bring up a lot of floodgates. Even as I say that, I'm thinking of a lot of sessions where it was like that moment of leaning into self or offering self-comfort, and that broke up a lot of emotional floodgates, because like, well, I never did that before. I always just felt this emotion, did this behavior, negated and got out of that thing, and now I'm actually sitting with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I think it's a worthwhile skill. Again, like I've said this, I think we talked about this. We talked about this on Tom's podcast, the other podcast. And
when we first met.
When you first met Tom, and we were talking about how like emotional regulation should be taught to every single human being. And it's not. I think that we could argue that maybe it's happening a little bit more in the context of like school settings and things like that, but it's not. It's people like ourselves that are sitting here and we're in our 30s and we're just now finding out like this is how my body responds to stress, where that could have been something really worthwhile learning.
Right? Or not to ignore it. That's the biggest cue that I have to pick up on is I can feel a great amount of discomfort. Don't ignore that just because you can withstand it or maintain it or focus on your other things through it.
Yeah, and I think that that's really hard for a lot of people because I think a lot of people have been in scenarios in which they don't trust themselves and they don't. I think a lot of it also comes back to sense of self, right? And like, what is my value as a person? Yeah. Because if you don't feel that you hold a lot of value, then you're probably not going to be trusting yourself a whole lot. And so when you are experiencing something like either I'm shut down or I'm really activated, it's easy for me as this person to kind of be like, but that's normal or it's fine. And I don't have to engage with that.
Yeah.
I again, like I've had some friendships where I hear this a lot of like, well, I feel like this, but it's fine. It's okay.
I can withstand that, or I can. Right.
Wow, she should have been up here the whole time because she's giving us emotional support as we.
She's happier like
as
this.
we hold space for others. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to talk about some of that stuff, and I think that again, each therapist has a different specialization and a different skill set, and you can walk into therapy and you can have all these different goals and things you might want to attain, or you might have absolutely no idea, and it's good to work through stress in these therapeutic relationships because it can get you to places that you didn't even realize you needed to be at.
That's my favorite thing that comes out of therapy is when people come in and they're like, I'm a little anxious at work and I've got this thing going on. And then when we get into it, it's all of this stuff that usually in some way they've known about. Like I always figured that was probably more impactful than I've ever given it credit for, or I never really did go back to that thing to figure out what it meant. And then a lot of times that's what
oh yeah. Yeah. You dig in and oh my gosh, I keep like, one of my best friends, we were talking about this week where she said to me, do you remember this thing that happened in middle school, and told me about it? And I was like, no, I don't. And it was a significant event.
Yeah.
And I was like, no wonder you feel this way. And she was telling me, she was like, well, I honestly don't really have much of a memory of it, but this is the thing that happened. And I was like, dude, of course you feel this way because of that thing. But it's like if you are in a space where maybe you're trying to like normalize your feelings, or you're trying to kind of explain them away because you have a lot of like maybe obsessive thoughts or repetitive thoughts and you're feeling really uncomfortable, like
that's the ticket right there. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, like I wish that we had that, or I wish that she had pointed that out to me sooner, because then I feel like I would have had maybe a completely different conversation with her, where I could have maybe held space in a little bit of a different way. But also maybe she wasn't aware.
I was just gonna say, especially if this happened
Emily,
all the
I hope you don't kill me for talking about you on the podcast, because
you love him.
Yeah, well, she's one of my best friends, and she's been one of my longest best friends. And I was just telling Tom the other day about how how much I really value her friendship, because she has been a person that we have seen each other through like everything. Like
All the stages.
oh my God, like to know somebody when you're 12 to 30,
Right?
like God bless us. We saw each other through braces. We've seen each other through trauma and relationships and all these things. And
like
I'm
siblings.
just, oh my God, I'm just so grateful for her friendship. I was just talking with Tom about how I was like, man, I just like love that I have her. So I apologize, Em, if you tell me if this is not, if you don't want me to reference you. But you teach me so much in our friendship, and I really value it highly. So, yeah, just a little caveat. Look at this baby.
I was just going to say, I'm going to try and lift her.
Just a little waxing.
The littlest baby.
It's a little baby.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good job.
She's like, I want to sit like on people's.
Okay.
Don't forget to pull it back.
Yes.
Yeah.
How's Dad, Hope?
Did we talk about all the things we wanted to talk about today?
You know what? We didn't talk about any of the stuff that we really had planned to talk about, but I like what we touched on.
Yeah.
What do you think, Tom? Is there any topics that that we started with, that you feel like we haven't quite come back full circle on? Going through everything.
I don't
in
think
mind.
so. I think that we talked about a lot about stress and distress, and I think that that's actually a really good way to walk into this idea of like therapy and what it can look like for different people, and to even come back to like the BetterHelp idea of like, it is great that you can access a service at your fingertips, but at the same time, like, you should be seeing progress. You should be feeling different things. You deserve more than like somebody walking on their treadmill and like talking to you.
Maybe that's where we pick up on next time is because you mentioned that even at the beginning of talking more about how to start with a therapist, how to find a therapist that actually feels like they have a connection with you.
Yeah.
How to address things like in the first session, what to expect. But even if
Yeah.
you're working with a therapist and you feel like they're a great person or a great connection, but the work isn't going where I want it to, these are all...
Yeah. I think it would be helpful to give like an outline of like, what can you ask? What can't you ask?
Right.
How much can I get to know my therapist? Because I'm very much that of like, I kind of want to know you a little bit.
Of course you do.
Like otherwise I can't connect, because you know how I like can't stand those fake shallow interactions, friendships, right? Like, I want to know, do you have a dog and what's their name? And like,
It's only fair. How can you share your most intimate, and to a degree, me having limited space in your space is what allows you to have so much and just to focus on you so we can really get in depth. But it's not fair for you
Yeah.
to not know anything about me or feel like you can't. That's
Yeah.
like and I think a lot of therapists are coming around. So that's a very like grad school thing that I feel like we all make fun of now. Is in grad school they tell you like don't share your thoughts, don't share your opinions,
don't react.
don't tell them anything.
Meanwhile,
about
in
yourself.
therapy, I'm like, they said what?
Yeah.
I'm like constantly emoting, that
Right.
just, yeah, I think we should talk about that. What you can and cannot ask.
Yeah.
How do you determine if somebody's a good fit for you? Maybe we should also talk about a little bit of, maybe some of the acronyms people will see,
Yes, like
Because-
IFS and
or like CBT, and like, why would I pick a CBT therapist versus an, what's the
EMDR.
EMDR therapy? You know what I mean? Like, why would I pick one? Or like, why would somebody suggest that I see this type of therapist versus another?
I love that. Yeah.
Because that's like, I remember I had helped somebody like try and find a therapist. And I mean, just that, like, just specialties alone, you're just like, I
Absolutely.
don't even know, again, I don't know what to ask.
That's why I started doing intakes. I have so much fun doing intakes because it's a mix of either I've never done therapy before, so I have no idea what to expect, or I've done it 1,200 times and I know exactly what I need and I don't want somebody that doesn't know what they're doing type of a thing. I have so much fun in those sessions of talking about what is this.
And maybe
thing.
that could be something, and I don't know how much outreach and things we're going to do, but I wonder if that could just be a helpful resource maybe that we make, right? Of like,
True.
maybe this is just like a helpful guide of questions that you could ask.
Get a little preparation, knowing what you're going into.
Take some notes on the person you're. As much as they're interviewing you, you should interview them back, right?
100%.
It's like a job interview. Like you're not just, they're selling themselves to you, not just you selling yourself to them.
You're paying them.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You're going to take your hard-earned money and you're going to give it to somebody, and you're going to divulge all your like serious life details. Like you deserve to have somebody that you know is a good fit and that you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, and that you get out of it what you've been wanting to get out of. If you're putting the work in, then you deserve to get out of it what you've been.
Yeah, so I think that those would be maybe some really good questions that hopefully we could answer or provide guidance for or whatever, so that way people who want to step into a therapeutic space like don't feel totally at a loss.
Right, Hope?
Hope's like, I want a guideline on how to lay on this couch every single day.
Yeah, she's a good reminder of slowing down.
Yeah. How much of her face can we see? Is there a good amount of her face? Oh, I love that. Oh, let's get that cheek action.
Right? No, cheeky.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was Friends Living Well. I'm Kelsey.
I'm Nikita.
This is Hope.
Thanks for being here.